Hey, Rick, thanks for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Dr. Rick Diamond, story healer. I genuinely love that story healer. So we're going to touch on that at some point here. I want to hear more about that, kind of the origin story and everything else. And my understanding is you work with a lot of individuals. You're in the process of writing a book. You're doing podcasts, you're speaking to people, you're out there, you're a busy man, and you're very dedicated to what you're doing now. And so I do want to really learn about that. I want to riff and kind of talk with some ideas and some conceptual thinking with you.
Great.
And everything in between. I'll leave it to you a little bit because I'd either like to hear a little bit more about that story healer background or just your background. But I want to hear about both. But either way, either one you want to start with, I'd love to dive into some of that background.
Thanks, man. I'm really glad to be here. I think the best place to start is to say that I grew up all over Texas being a very good boy.
Okay.
And when I say it that way, that sets up the idea that all along as I was growing up as a white kid in, 60s and 70s in the South, in the Southwest, whatever Texas is, go to church and go to school and be a scout and be in baseball and be nice to my sister and turn in assignments and all that kind of stuff. And it worked fine. I grew up, went to college, blah, 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 got a master's degree, became a college English teacher and loved being in the academic world. And there was a part of me that just did not always want to be a good boy. There was a part of me that wanted to say, so what would it be like if I asked a tougher question? Or what would it be like if we maybe did something a little more creative? And I was sometimes, have you seen Dead Poet Society? I think I was a lot of Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society. Sometimes we met outside. Sometimes I stood on the desk, whatever we had to do to have the students have the experience where they were taking the material and making it their own, as opposed to the guy just standing up there talking. Yeah, absolutely. Got married, had 2 kids, went to church, did all the stuff, blah, 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 blah. And something was like, I just knew something was off and I didn't know what it was because I was through the programming. The story was I was supposed to be a good boy. And we were going to church and I was having these really big, meaningful experiences within that I could not explain. And I didn't understand what they were. And they were spiritual and they were awakening experiences. And I asked the pastor and thought, I'm probably crazy. I don't know what's wrong with me. And he said, have you ever read a book of the Bible like a book? And I said, I'm sorry, I have no idea. You mean like, you guys pull quotes out and then you've no thing out of it? And he said, no, you're a teacher. You're an English teacher. I want you to read the Gospel of Mark from beginning to end and think of it as having a beginning, middle, and end with a main character, protagonist, antagonist conflict. And it has a really weird ending. And I was just like, what is happening right now? And I went and read the Gospel of Mark, which is super short. And a light went off in my head and I started to do this whole deep dive into a kind of way of seeing the stories that everybody accepts as true and looking behind them. And he said, I'd been doing that the whole time. Anytime a student would say, why are we reading this poem? Or what is this about? Or whatever. The whole time I didn't realize it, but I had been saying, you know what? We could really look at what's underneath this poem or this expectation or this thing that you guys are all supposed to know because you're in an English class. And I had been doing this whole time. I'd been doing it for years. And it was all about, it's not deconstructing and tearing things down. It's about asking more questions to see what's the thing behind the thing. And so there's the story that's official. And when I work with men, especially in a men's retreat setting or a men's circle setting, when I ask men what the story is for them, there's so much that they unpack. The business world tells me I have to be this. The family world tells me I have to be this. The social world tells me I have to be this. The sports world says this, the politics world says this, and all of them are like ready to tear clumps of their hair out because there's something in them that's not true to that story. That story doesn't fit. So it's all about all of us finding, which was what was going on for me in my 40s and 50s as I was starting to ask, wait a minute, what doesn't fit? Like, why doesn't this fit? It's all of us finding the authentic piece within ourselves and being able to see, wait a minute, that is the story, but I'm not the story. So what am I and what's in you for me? I ended up going to seminary. I became a minister. I worked in organized religion for 10 years and I was always still Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society. And eventually I decided with a group of people, let's go do something else. And so I started a really weird, beautiful, experimental, open source faith community here in Austin, Texas, and led it for 17 years. And it was all about people being free to say, I don't believe this, or this is what I'm about, or where am I at? And it was liberals and conservatives and progressives and people of different color and different faith background. And
Yeah.
it was this great place for cross-pollination and being completely who you were and radically accepting one another. And it was hard and it was weird and it was great. And I loved it. And then a few years ago, I felt like after 30 years, I had done what I came to do in that world and took a break. And then said, what would it be like to just work with individual people and groups of people and not be in a setting like a church or a company or a business or whatever else? And what if I just did this on my own and I just started my own practice? And I said, do you know what we're doing? We're taking the story, we're looking at it, we're testing it. And then the healing that comes out of that is that I get to choose my own story. And so that's where the idea of a story healer came from.
Beautiful. I absolutely love that, man. Okay. So number of different things. Let me start with the book of Mark, because we come back to a few points that you had. Have you ever heard of Joseph Murphy? He talks about the states of being, the Bible as states of being.
Oh, wow.
So almost as if you read it and the parts are an emotional state or in a mental state, an approach. And this is what's beautiful, what you were saying too, is you're really taking a philosophical view. And I don't mean to put a label on it, but there's a good correlation with how you were just describing that. And I was taking that as a very philosophical view, is the layers of layers, not just what's prescribed to you, not what's just fed to you.
The story.
The story, or not somebody's interpretation. So a teacher will tell you a poem. They'll tell you the meaning. Right. They'll tell you maybe the literary meaning or the definable meaning per the literary rules, but that's not what it is. There's a state of being. There's a mindset behind it. There's an emotional state. And Joseph Murphy talks about the Bible as being states of being.
Oh, wow.
So the different stories and books. So then reading them as that, in that state of mind or in that state of being. And it fundamentally changes. And that's where two is the imagined within. That's the I am. And that's a whole nother philosophical, not even philosophical. That's that source pattern of that. And I didn't realize you were doing that for so long too. You said 17 years for the one group too. So is that still going on? Did you leave that legacy, or did that kind of close that loop?
Oh, they're still going strong.
Beautiful.
They went through their own process of, okay, the founding guy is leaving and what do we want to do and who do we want to be? And they went through a whole beautiful process of discernment, and it was during COVID and they were super brave and awesome, and they did a big search and did a whole thing, and they're still meeting right over the two or three blocks from here. They're still going strong. They're doing great.
See, that's cool. That's really nice. So you left this, I'll call it a legacy, or a continued energetic chain that's other people get to make uniquely their own too. I mean, what a contribution.
It was very open, raggedy anyway. So the fact that everybody got to, step in, and there were all different kinds of people in leadership, but it was very collaborative and co-creative. At some point, they didn't need me anyway. They were doing their thing. So I could just step aside and wish them well and send them on their way, and they've done great.
Yeah. So another thing I wanted to touch on too is because you were talking about these, particularly you said the men, but women too, just ready to tear their hair out, because I think there's just so much categorical expectation. So there's such rigidity where people are just putting yourselves into systemizations and parties and views, and you have to believe the totality of something. If it almost spurs off one little aspect if you believe in, but it's not like that. We're divinely complex creatures and complementary creatures that we can show up in different capacities to different levels within all these subsets. It's obvious, like we show up different, maybe we don't, but with like family or work or friends or somebody we start to court or somebody we've known for many years. We're fundamentally the same person, but we do show up in different capacities. So we have the capabilities of accepting, absorbing, and so that in itself too is fully identify with kind of that what you're saying with these people that want to pull their hair out. Because it's when you go through the good boy, and as soon as you said that, I was like, I knew it. I resonated with that, because there's this expectation: if you follow the rules, you did it right, you win the game.
You win.
What's the game? Win the game of life, like first one done wins. We don't make it out alive. We don't. And in this time we're here to have those beautiful experiences, have those questioning experiences. That's when the deep living happens.
Yeah.
Maybe that's when the deep pain happens too, and the strife and the dualities and things like that. But those recognitions and those distances of, I want this, I'm here and I want this, those desire points, the feeling of external. And that's where those gaps are where you're going to feel the strongest, where you're going to have the biggest, most emotional experience. And it's not that playing it safe is fundamentally, I don't believe it's like wrong. But to expand and that's what too, even when you go on the journey of learning or asking the deeper questions, I don't want to keep saying that's when the pain comes. It doesn't always have to be painful, but it does. There is
Come on, man. Yes, that's when the pain comes. Whenever there's a shift, whenever we move, whenever we go through a transformation, whether it's the hero's journey or initiation or death and rebirth or whatever, anytime we're willing to shift, anytime we're willing to move, there's pain. Of course there's pain. That doesn't mean that the pain is absolute. The pain is part of the process of shifting, of growing, of evolving, of changing. And in the middle of it, we feel like caterpillar goop where we're not a butterfly yet and we don't know what we are. And it's terrible.
The crystalline, that energy. Yeah. And that's where those sparks of that singularity, a little spark of something. And sometimes it is in the sense of a positive. It's generally a positive. I want this. I have this beautiful idea. But sometimes it's coming from those pain points of, I don't want this. Yeah. So then there's the recognition, and that's where you're working through that singularity, understanding, and I'll just go into the duality. Now we have contrasted and it may be conflict at times, but we don't know what it is without perspective. So we have to gain perspective to see it. And then once truly, I'll just say maybe a sense of mastery or comfort with it or whatever, is I believe you can find those balances of the duality and the acceptance that it is of the same thing and it's okay.
Right.
And once you have those acceptance, you come back into a little bit of a singularity, but you can bring all those lessons with you, all those strengths with you. And now you get to be a greater version of what that original desire point was. And then we're humans and then we want something new. I want something else now. What's up the game? Yeah.
We're always looking.
Yeah.
The thing that process you were just talking about too, and thank you for how you articulated that. It made total sense. The idea of when somebody comes to me and there's a woman client that I have who said, when we did our discovery call and we were just first talking about what was going on with her, she said, I'm dealing with cancer, 40, I'm struggling, and I realized that I'm going to be fine. All the prognosis is good. I'm in all of this distress at one level. And she says, there's another part of me that is very clear that there's something that I want to let go of so that I can move toward the thing that I want to become.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm looking at this seeming crisis as an opportunity to go through that very same process that you were just talking about, where she says, I'm ready to stop saying I'm a survivor, I'm gone, look at all the pain I've gone through. She said, I really want something different. And so we did a whole process over a series of sessions where what she came up with is, I want to embrace my entire experience. I don't want to just talk about how I've survived and how I have scars and how I'm resilient. She said, that's a message for women a lot of the time anyway in our culture. You're so strong, you're so resilient. She said, I just want to get to the place where I can say, I am in acceptance of my entire experience. All that I am all that has happened, all that I am, everything that's brought me to this place, and be in a place of synthesis where it all is one reality for her personally. It was an amazing process just to watch her go through that and to claim that for herself.
Yeah. And that is the beauty of it, because there are times in our life where we're all capable of things, I believe. There are times where we go the other way and we sink into those depths or into those dark nights of the soul, and we stew in that.
Yeah.
And there's times that we want to stew in it because we want to swallow in our own little swimming pool of goop.
Yeah.
And maybe not want to quite see, because you got to acknowledge it, you got to take responsibility for it. And those are some of those fears of success of like, now if I win and I get above it, now I have to take responsibility for it. But that's what you just laid out there too, is that's where those real power comes from when people do those as individuals. We do them all the time. We do them sometimes in little ways all the time. And then there's those big ones where you're just like, and I like that and I don't want to oversimplify that situation either, but not identifying with the pain, there's a real power in saying in that particular, and I don't want to overuse that example, but I'm a survivor of X. There's a power in that, but then you become to identify that. And now the external world identifies you as that. And now there's this exchange as you're the overcomer. When I think living in that state of, I see these, I have all these aspects of it, and I'm good with. Like, I'm good with that other side. Like, it's dark, it's deep. I've swam in my pile of poop, and then I have the beauty and all these things, and I'm good with both sides. That's what those equanimous moments. That's really that kind of heaven on earth.
Yep.
You know, we don't know, and it's how everybody views that the word heaven externally, but there's I think it's Whitehead or another philosopher that says something like, and there's a quote that says something like, heaven is a place where nothing happens. And it's a humorous little, because if you think about it, there's no perspective. It's just, if it's just bliss, it's bliss. But then if it's bliss, there's no bliss because there's nothing to conflict with. So
what are we experiencing? How are we?
Yeah, what are we experiencing? So then we're in this world of the dualities and the silhouettes and the conflicts and everything else.
Yeah.
To gain perspective. And to see those sides, to be able to experience them and understand that I am in these spots. So those to gain, I'm trying to think, gain field awareness or have spatial awareness of that. But that's a beautiful story that you gave where she realized that I'm beyond that.
Yeah. Moving out of that place of being in, moving out of that place of being in the struggle. We're all in struggle, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
We're all growing and stretching. And at the same time, I use her as an example because she was so clear about, she wasn't clear about what she wanted, but she was clear about what was not working for, what didn't fit anymore. It was like this suit of clothes doesn't fit me anymore. I'm ready for a transformation.
I think sometimes that's all you need too. I don't, I'm sorry, we're talking, but that's it. You don't need to know like that specific box. That's the how sometimes.
Yeah.
Just to be in that state.
I hear
that's beautiful.
I've heard the quote, and I love it, where people say, and one of my spiritual teachers says, look, tell the universe what it is that you want to get really clear about it, and then let go of all the hows. The hows, the specifics, are the responsibility of the universe. And at first, years ago, when I first heard this, I was like, that's the stupidest thing I ever said. But who's going to do it if I'm not figuring it all out?
Exactly. I got to put all the pulleys and the gears in place, man. I need to know the how. That
is so upside down. Do you know what I mean?
It is.
There's so much happening that I'm not in control of, that I don't know anything about. I have the things that are in front of me that I can look at with any kind of clarity, even a little bit. And that's about it. And the rest of it, I have to be in a position of co-creating with a lot of things I can't even see, you know?
And you said something there too. The way you said it was help the universe be what I want to be clear about. I think if that is even a step beyond just the desire point. I use a tangible, I want this house, I want this car, whatever, and a very specific thing on the goal settings and stuff, but it's not really that many I would even argue really all the time, but I'll just say most times I'll give people credit for a desire point. Sometimes it really does bring them joy. It's not, but sometimes it's those deeper sense of securities, or it's those deeper sense of self-loves, and those things that influence us. And I'll say one more thing too on that, and it just sparked a memory, is that as far as like behavioral science in buying patterns, like this is the marketers, you do the big reports and stuff like that. And the things that drive consumerism is the self, the other, and then the system. The systems are like things that accelerate our happiness or make us get something faster or more efficient or something like that. But it's self, the other. And a lot of times too, even those systems are really just, is this a way that the others will accept me? And then I'll feel good about myself. Some things fold into ourselves.
Yes.
What are those motives? So going back to that thing where it's helped me be clear about what I really want. And so many times that I'll get hung up on my own life about stuff with my family, my two boys, my wife, and it'll be like that kind of those deep survival things, those correlations that you don't recognize. And it just somehow there's like this essence of, did I chop enough wood to make it through the winter? But in the sense, it's money. Do I got enough money? I need the money. And it's not really the money. It's the security to weather the storms. So like and then the feel the secure and feel like a provider and these other things that are deep rooted in me, and start peeling back the onion on some of that stuff. So Yeah.
Getting to the thing that's under the thing, right? That's what I was talking about earlier. The work of story work from is really about it's like any other really meaningful spiritual or personal discipline where somebody's willing to do the same kind of questioning you were just talking about. That I'm feeling this really need to, is our 401k, how much is in the bank? But underneath that is, there's a part of me that is motivated by the need to provide on the one hand, and also the fear that I'm going to be a bad guy or not do what I'm responsible for or whatever. And how can I make peace with all of that within myself and then choose how to act and how to behave out of that place of peace, as opposed to out of a default story that's telling me something and making me behave in a way that I'm not clear about. Because then I'm going to be more peaceful regardless of what the outcome is.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it from those places of peace, because there's things too, and the only reason I use myself is because we're just sitting here, but I'll just do that again as an example, it's that feeling of requirement, the duty. I have the requirement of, and I'll just use that same thing, the provider and the requirement. So then I'm creating actions and I'm making my decisions from the requirement of the duty. And it's not that's a bad thing structurally, but at the same place, it's not coming from a place of peace, creativity, that deep love. It's coming from a much more surface-based level of this plane, of this life plane where, and then it's the nuts and the bolts and the gears and the pulleys that I'm just putting in place to drive the machine, the mechanics of the left brain. And so,
and when we're doing it for year after year after year, of course, there's certain things that we get rewarded by. There's certain things that reinforce it. But then there's another thing that's happening that I find over and over with people, which is they know at some deep spirit level, heart level, like their heart mind, this deep place within, that they're chasing something that's not really what it's really about. Maybe it's really about the deep desire for connection. Maybe it's really about the deep desire for creativity. Maybe it's really about the deep desire to do good work. But it's covered up by the behaviors that are, like you said, that are part of the story, the default, the expectation, the duty, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens when people can let go, can see the difference between those and let go of, I'm supposed to do this. Aren't I supposed to do this? This is what I'm supposed to be doing? And
society told me that. Growing up, my parents told me that. My friends told me that. The teachers in my school, they told me that. You're going to grow up and get a job someday, and then you're going to work for the corporation. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's what I just got to do. Let's do it. And then, like you said, like 30 years goes by and you're like, what just happened?
What just happened? Yeah, there's that. And so the part of us that stays awake and alive, like the part of us that is, as I say on my videos, hey, you beautiful eternal soul having a human experience, right? That beautiful part of us that is eternal, that's, to use the language from the scriptures, created in the image of God, right? That whatever your tradition is, that thing knows better. It always knows better.
It does.
And it's patient. Do you know what I mean? But it's not going to wait forever. Like at some point, it's going to give us a gift of like deep discontent.
Or there's times in our lives that burns the ships. Like there's no point or no returns. Or you have the phoenix that, and the rising, and we do have those, it's really the same line, but it's taken a little bit another step onto it. But we do have those points in our last seasons of our life. There are crashes within I brought up the money or the love or the health, those big things, or the feeling of community, the loss of don't have friends. You look back 30 years later and you were working so much. I'm like, I don't have any friends anymore. Now they don't have a community. And there's things like that we do. And there's the deep recognition. And I like that you said the heart mind too. There is really something to that heart mind. And if I may too, I feel like I'm jumping a little bit, but we'll come back to the same thread where we left off. But because it's true that there's a way I imagine some of the heart mind, kind of three minds to the body. Mm-hmm. There's brain, the heart mind, and then the gut mind. Mm-hmm. And the gut, you have a gut instinct. There's a lot of stuff in the gut, and that's closer to the Mother Earth and then the Father Sky, and it meets at the heart. And if it's being pulled, and there's a discontent in the heart. And that's why a lot of this stuff hurts the heart when you're off from the Father Sky and the Mother Earth.
Yes.
And then you get into the expression of this too, and the recognition of that's when you get too caught in the material world. There's it is in the gut. It's consumerism and things like that, where you're too caught in the world in those lower chakras. It's just a view. It's a tangible way I view some of those things. But even that's the consumption of the body, because you want the material and the balance is there's something up in the Father Sky to the Mother Earth, and you're not treating the Mother Earth very well when you're, for that example of the consuming food or overeating or something like that. I'm using it as an example.
All that the consuming is, right? That
yeah,
I need this. I'm going to take this in, and then somehow I'll be satisfied, but we're not satisfied.
Yeah, or feel secure or something, like somehow that's safe. Like,
exactly.
Again, the thing with the wood, do I have enough wood to last the winter? Or did I eat enough to last the winter or something? It's all playing with that.
It's all that.
Yeah.
And so at some deep level, when thank you too for that analogy, when we are out of that balance, whether we're too consumed with all the consumption, or we're too in our heads and too up in the sky.
And too in our heads, because it goes the other way. Yeah.
We're not connected to this place within. And then it's not at all shocking that heart disease is so prevalent in this culture. Like,
absolutely.
Heart disease.
Thank you for that recognition. Absolutely.
I mean, because we're not honoring this centered place within ourselves. And for me, my meditation practice, when I've done breath work, when I've done plant medicine, when I've done spiritual journeys, how about when I'm just in nature? Do you know what I mean? When I'm just quiet, that's the place to come back to. That's the place that knows, that heart mind, as you said, it has an intelligence. It's very wise. It knows what it is. It also is a thing that is telling me, this isn't working. This isn't working. This isn't working.
Yeah.
And I need to listen to that more. We all do. It's going to tell us the truth. We can trust it.
It will. Yeah. It has no way to lie. These minds don't lie. So we're the ones that concoct the stories to put some colorful scheme on it, which is the story thing. And that's, I'd love to hear this, but I was just going to say, it's like, why do we tell stories? We tell stories to rally people, to convince them, to convince ourselves. The lies or BS that we tell ourselves are sometimes is sometimes more convincing than, than we tell other people. But I guess too, is like, is some of that stuff. Why do we tell stories? Where do they source from?
So interesting, because when I did the research to think about the grounding research for the story work concept, it's so clear that human beings, we don't just ideate in stories, but there is something basic to how our brains and our consciousness works, in the sense that we're always telling stories. We're always thinking in terms of narrative, not just words, but this happened and this happened, whether it's how the world was formed or what happened yesterday or how I reached this decision. But the people that study consciousness who talk about, look at the way dreams work. Like, a dream is a story. There is something deep in the way our consciousness constructs our experience and our reality that is narrative. So one of my practices with story work is to look at, not only there is a belief, which is a story, but what does the story tell you? If you do, this is what will happen. And for many people, the story that they heard was, if I do this, I'll be rewarded. If I do that, I'll be punished. And then they can give you an example immediately. Oh, I know this guy. He did this. This is how it turned out. Or I knew this woman. She was super successful. She was really happy. And so...
Yeah, confirmation bias. We have a Rolodex of confirmation file folders, confirmation biases.
We found a story to support the story. And the next thing, we think it's the truth. And the fact is that everything is a story, and it's all invented. All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. In which case,
I love that you say that. But
the question is, we get to test it. We get to look at it. We get to examine it. We get to hold it. We get to see, is this really true for me in my experience today? And by the way, 10 years ago, I had a whole different set of beliefs and parameters about what I thought was true. I've grown, I've changed, I've evolved. 10 years from now, I hope I have some more different ones, right?
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, no, it's so deep. It's so powerful. And I think too, is even when we tell the stories, it's that you get into that subconscious, or the river that runs underneath it, that energetic source. And where are you pulling from? So now you enter in the biases or the emotions or the feelings or the desires, and then you start to get into the complexities of the layers or what we're telling people. And some people are, I don't want to say it's not that some people are better than it than others. I think that some people, they weave the webs a little bit tighter. But the places, what's really interesting, even the saying that weave, because I had this image, of course, the spider weaving the web. But the more little webs you weave of trying to convince people, it's almost the smaller your world becomes. When you're in the place of peace, there's less stories you're telling. You're not telling yourself as many stories. You're not trying to convince yourself of anything. You're not trying to convince anybody of anything.
Yeah.
So the expansive, I think the emotion of the energy is just allowed to be much larger, because I just feel I've had that image of just telling these stories in these short little like tethers to everybody, because if I tell you a story and then I tell somebody else a story, I got to remember the story I told you. Otherwise I got to tell everybody the same story so that we're all on the same page. So that I convince you that I'm cool or something. I don't know.
It does become
and then you'll love me. And then it'll be like, oh, Rick really thinks I'm great. I have self-worth now.
Wow. Oh my God. I'm get back with you about this to follow up for the book. I'm just saying.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And I did want to ask you about, yeah.
No, I love
analogy.
that. No, it totally makes sense, because the more we're weaving, to use the idea of the spider, right? The more we're weaving the story, weaving the web, weaving the story, weaving the web. If it's not tied to at a deep level, whether we're looking at Jungian archetypes or myth or the most old grounded spiritual traditions from East and West and indigenous cultures all over the world, they're tied to the stories that are like in that energetic, that river that you talked about, that deep source that's within us. There are stories that are really deeply grounded, that are meaningful, that are not something somebody made up because they wanted to justify something, or somebody had a campaign they were trying to win, or somebody was trying to get somebody persuaded. These are reflections of something that's true at the deepest level of what it means to be these spiritual human beings. Right. When we go back to those things, those resonate. They are true at a deep level. Fair. It's these other ones you're talking about that we're manufacturing and moving and doing the thing and working. We're exhausted at the end of the day.
It is. Yeah. It is exhausting. And use that. I'll just stay on that one, the spider thing again. If I have all these short little tether webs to people, then I'm occasionally just like plucking the guitar string and going, ding, hey, don't forget the story. And ding, it really does shrinks the entirety of that. I can't expand past that because I'm tethered in there. We tie ourselves into these things. And then it could be like in the family dynamics. How woven are those stories with the family dynamics or the old friends or even the work environments they start to spin and weave baskets of their own.
And this too is that people, when that deep knowing within them is unsatisfied and it keeps saying, this isn't working, and they don't believe that they have permission to change things because the story has told them that they can't change it. I have to have this job. I have to have this car. I have to have this thing. I can't forgive her. I can't whatever. God won't, whatever, the whole whatever. Then sometimes our deep knowing will throw a wrench into the works to force us to, at some level, deal with this at a larger, more substantive reality than we're willing to look at.
Yeah. Either level the playing field, like completely level it, or shatter your perspective on it and force you to reframe and relook at that.
We think of
like you just have no choice,
but they don't have to be a crisis. They're always going to be, the deep knowing within us is always going to be working for our good. It's always going to be bringing us the next thing that is a teacher for us. It's just, often we resist, right? But the deep knowing does want us to be free from all those webs. It really does. It wants us to be free from all this stuff that we're inventing. It's just a question of finding guides and helpers and allies and wisdom and having the guts and the balls to break free.
And not everybody, I hate to say this too, is like, and it's like one of those things for any younger listeners, not everybody carries with you. There are people that there are seasons of life that people don't transgress in this. And it's not a better or less than thing. It's just,
and you know what? It's really okay for a season. Yeah. For friendships or for connections or for a job or for a relationship or for a marriage or for a belief system to last for a season. It doesn't have to be this is the be all and end all and it's carved in stone. Oh my gosh, what are we carrying with us? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Unless you're in that state of requirement, the duty. Sorry, I didn't mean to bring it back up, but I did. Yeah.
It's totally. Yeah. If that's the story we're believing and if that's the system that we're following and that's the thing that we think we're supposed to be, we'll carry it all.
Yeah.
Until we drop.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too, is I touched on it too, is, and this is just a little redundant to what we were already talking about. We're in that story vein, because there really is something to it, but it's the stories we tell ourselves are far more convincing. And then there's things too, there's the smallest little things like, when we feel those gaps, I'm getting to a point, and I think the point is that I've had times in my life where I know that I feel far from something.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this deep resentment, but I don't know why. And I think that there's even those things, like I remember hearing a long time, it was in a low point in my life, maybe 10 years ago or something. I remember somebody's look in the mirror every morning and tell yourself you love you look at that person and say, I love you 10 times. And it was funny, as I thought about it instantly, I had this visceral, that's dumb. And then I felt like I couldn't even do it, because I was just like so resentful with myself, because I had failed in business at that time. And I was like, just so mad at myself. And it's interesting. And I have told this story a couple of times. So obviously there must be something there, but I'd like to believe I'm beyond it, but I'm obviously using an example, learning point. But yeah, there's those times in our lives where you just at a deep level.
Yes.
And it expresses itself in different ways. Sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's resentment, sometimes it's sadness, sometimes it's this deep, you feel like you let yourself down to some degree.
One of my favorite teaching tools for that thing that you're talking about, and so many people, men and women that I've talked to, have one aspect of that or another in their experience, especially as in adulthood, when they're holding it all together and figuring it all out and carrying everything. And it's is the Jimmy Stewart Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life, from 1940. Yeah, but with this guy, he is holding it all together and doing the thing, and he's in the story, and he's in the duty, and he's in the responsibility, and he just is about to absolutely go nuts. He's going to snap. And the beautiful thing that happens for him is that he sees himself differently because of this experience. And whatever we have to do to be able to see that there's just another possibility, absolutely possibility, it can work. It doesn't have to be that an angel has to show up and jump a river and then we jump in the water. We don't have to go on a vision.
Yeah.
But there is this real sense of, I believe, my experience is, and many people that I've worked with over the years have said, we really don't understand the hold that our cultural story about duty and responsibility has on our thinking at it.
Absolutely.
We don't realize how imprisoned we are by it.
Absolutely. And that's, it even too is, it may not sound related, but I really feel it is, even those flow states. So out of how to sync we are, there's the circadian rhythms, and people in the farmers, they would get up at early and before the sun would come up, and then there'd be a nap and then another siesta. And there's those flow states that we work in our highest and best. And we can achieve so much and very condensed if you're in those rhythms. And this 8 on, you come home and you plug into the medias, and then you sleep for, then you got your 8, you punch the clock, and yeah. That's not the rhythm that we were ever intended for.
But if the message is consume more or have more or achieve more or do more, like if that's the overflowing, the overriding message, then we're not going to pay attention to the symptoms that are healthy.
If you believe that's your responsibility to become a better consumer, to become a better bill payer, have a bigger mortgage and a more expensive car payment, that's your purpose.
Yeah.
It's at some point you hit that little bit of what am I doing here? But then maybe you're so dialed in, because there is a slow erosion to some of that. And by the time you see it, so it can take a while, but the perspectives and the change, and there is something different. Those are beautiful points. And then too, like you even touched on certain modalities with yogas, breathworks, and some of those everybody has a little bit of a different key to some of those too. It might not be a formal meditation, might be a walking meditation and things like that. And people just have to explore those. I think it's very important to explore those, to see what those are. Give yourself permission to figure out what those balances are. And then when you're able to have those awareness and be mindful and have those awarenesses, that's the beauties are going to come out in the mundane and the smallest little things. They're not an angel that jumps in the river with you.
Right.
It's usually the most smallest little thing. You might see, a hawk flying or a hummingbird or whatever that is. Yeah. And all of a sudden you're just brought to tears and you're just like uncontrollably sobbing in beauty on the most smallest little, most mundane thing.
Yeah.
And those are the moments, but you do have to be attuned and allowance to have those too.
Really believe that. I mean, the idea of all of the great spiritual traditions is it's just about awakening. It's just about realizing that this, Emily Dickinson, the American poet, said this world is not conclusion, right? There's more going on than all this stuff that we're so caught up in. And in the moments that you were just describing, whether it's, oh my God, look at this incredibly beautiful leaf on the pond right in front of me. I'm thinking, oh, I'm awake. Oh, I'm awake. For when we're looking at another person, we really see them. I mean, they're not a commodity. They're not something to manage. They're not somebody that we have to deal with. We see that's a sovereign human being just sitting there. We go, oh, I'm sorry. I remember now. I remember.
Yeah.
The process of remembering, the process of remembering who we are, the process of awakening. That's the way out of the trap for me. Yeah. Yeah. That really is. It's really it. It's coming back to the heart mind. It's coming back to center. It's coming back to who we truly are. And then deciding from that place what it is that we want, what it is that we want to do next, what needs to be done. It's really that.
I agree. Yeah. And I do like that you said making the decisions from that place. When you make them from the fears and make them from the other things or the desperations, it's not the same. Nowhere near the depth of it's a survival. We just discussed that. Is that in your book? Is that some of the things you discuss? Can you have a time to touch on your book and where that's going and what you're building there?
So much. The first section of the book is everything's a story. So the thing that you and I have been talking about, which is we have all these mechanisms and we have all these belief systems and we have all these things, and how do they affect us and how do they get grounded into us over years and years, and how can we begin to see the story? And then the second section of the book is you are not the story. There's something going on that is not just, I have this body that I'm so grateful for and I'm not this body, and I have these thoughts and I'm really grateful for these thoughts and I'm not these thoughts. Something else is these thoughts, and I have these emotions and I have all this stuff that's happening, but there's something else that's deep within me that's like really having this human experience. And so we explore the idea of selfhood and consciousness and the story and how the story interweaves with our consciousness. And then the last part is story healing, which is how do you then come up with tools to make decisions about, do I believe this story? Is this what I want? Do I want to rewrite it? How do I put into practice, whether it's through rituals with my body, whether it's through yoga and stretching, whether it's through affirmations, whether it's through changing something about how I've structured my life's work or how I've structured my day or whatever modality I can access for myself, so that I'm willing to take the step of saying, I'm gonna believe that something else is possible for me. And so the last section of the book has a lot of really practical tools and questions to ask, and has forms that you can use as a worksheet for yourself.
There are some really beautiful ways to rewrite some of that, where you can maybe do meditation or go back, or the thought of it, and then reaffirming and recognizing the human too, like a parent. Of course, everybody goes back to the parents. I'm a dad. I'm sure I'm messing my kids up in some way, shape, or form somehow. And but there's some of those are rewriting, where you look at this and it's that envisioning of the parents and being like, they're just humans trying to figure this out themselves. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't malice. It was just, sure, I wanted more because I was a child, but he didn't get it. So somehow that shaped it. But do you touch on any of the rewriting of the memories, or maybe I'm not saying it right?
Absolutely. No, you're saying it exactly right. This idea of, like, for instance, a client that I was working with really recently said, I am so anxious in public settings. And she said, it's driving me crazy. I want to be able to orient to myself. I find that I'm orienting to everybody else. What is everybody else wanting? What is everybody else needing? She's 40, right? And I said, if we're going to track this story down, the story, she said, is there a story? I was like, let's see if there's a story. I said, do you remember the first time that you felt this tension of needing to, and she said, oh my gosh, I remember my mom and dad were so mad at each other that my mom was in one room and my dad was in the other room, and they would send me back and forth when I was 5 years old.
Oh, wow.
To message between them. And I said, okay, so do you think it's possible that you learned hypervigilance about what everybody else was feeling?
Yes.
In that exchange right there. And she,
absolutely.
Oh my God, I was the little messenger girl. I said, she was. So that's the story. She said,
she had to discern those emotional states. She was the carrier. Wow.
She was overworked.
It's powerful.
She was hypervigilant. She was doing the thing. So then the first thing that we did in this particular case, in this session, the first thing we did was grieve. Like, we just sat for a minute and wept. She was really brokenhearted about seeing what this little girl was doing and the burden that had been put on her. And then the next thing we did after we did our grieving and we felt into that was to say, before we go forward and decide what you want instead, I want us to honor that little girl. And she was just like, we need to honor her. I said, yeah, because she was so brave. She was just trying to figure it out. She read the room. She figured out, how do I survive in this situation? She adapted. She came up with strategies. The fact that she's still running your social interactions and she was 5 and you're 40, you can decide to do something different now. But let's honor her. Let's not denigrate her and tell her that she was being silly or foolish or wrong. And she's like, oh my gosh, she was so awesome. So I love it. Honored a little girl and energetically blessed her little girl. And she got to say some things to a little girl from her heart in a way that was really honoring for that little girl just doing the best she could to survive. And then came, so who wants to be in charge of reading the room now? And she was like, oh, I do. I want to be the grown up. I was like, okay, good. So then we just rewrote the story and we came up with a different framework. So it can be anything from trauma to old patterns. It can be how people felt early. It could be in school. It could be with a mentor. It could, whatever along the way. It certainly can be with early mentors in business or school or education where we adapted to somebody else's message. And then we sit that and reframe it before we move forward and decide something else.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I think really feel this empathic pain where they're very sensitive to the wrong. And that was a very powerful story. I'm sure there's many people that have similar, if not the same type of scenarios where they were that mediator and had to balance somebody else's emotions, but they carry that into today's workforce or into the other relationships they have.
Yeah.
And that empath, they're tortured souls sometimes with that mind, that essence of, I can tell if somebody else is doing this, that person's going to get crabby. Right. All right, I'm going to do a bunch of backflips and round off flip flops and somersaults and so we can change the weather in the room.
Right.
So that it doesn't cascade and this one person is okay. Right. And you have a lot of people that are sensitive like that and they start doing these. There's even times too, again, I'll use myself as an example. There's certain people I've been around that I feel are going to say something to my kids about something. So then I might, and I say reprimand, I not reprimand them like harshly, just be like, hey, just let's not do that or something like that. And not normally in a situation I would ever say that because I want them to explore, I want them to be kids and all these things. Right. But I'm like, I want to do it before somebody else does it. So now I find myself doing something that's out of character for me to avoid something else that would escalate. Because
exactly,
it's just things like that. That's just one of a million different examples of people.
It totally tracks because here we are so oriented to, I want to prevent this or I want to make sure this doesn't happen. Do this.
So I'm becoming a different version of myself and that's when you just really feel, and I don't want to be here. This is not my jam. And then as we become more aware and we become more, whatever version of that is for us, we're just even more hypersensitive to it. And personally, I just want to take myself out of it, but you can't all hide in a cave either. You have to co-create in this world, but
it's just a question of remembering who we are, coming back to ourselves. That's really it. I'm doing it.
Absolutely.
In January in a little town in a retreat center outside Austin, here where I live, a cute little beautiful place out in the country. And the tagline for the name of it is On the Path Home, but the tagline is, we're going to help each other remember who we are. Like that's really all we need to be doing. We can identify the stories. We can identify the things that we got caught up in. We can identify the trauma or the pain or the sadness, but really it's just coming back to this place.
Absolutely.
And it may be that nobody else cooperates in the world around us. It may be that they don't want us to remember who we are.
Yeah.
It's too bad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
At some point, it's just, no, I have to be in this place for myself.
Yeah. Those early creative moments, those early times of freedom and security and things like that. And I'd say too, and I said it when we were talking about the singularity into the duality, into the Trinity, as far as coming back. But I think the gift in those things too, when you're coming back home, is that we get to bring all these new lessons with us and all these new strengths and these new empowerments that to be that who we are, but a stronger, more beautiful version of what that is. And that's what's cool about, I like the coming back of home. It's not about being a toddler again. It's about being this version of me today with the purity and security and and I get to experience that in a home more beautiful, expanded way. So
Well said. Thanks.
Yeah.
Perfect. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you had the book, you had the retreats, and you get to work with people. I love it. How can people find you so they can keep up with it and reach out to you or work with you? What's the best way?
drrickdiamond.com. That's it. And that's also
beautiful.
my handle on YouTube. It's just Rick Diamond Story Work. It's Dr. Rick Diamond, and the same thing on Instagram and Facebook. It's just Dr. Rick Diamond. And so that's where I'm at, all over the place. I'm now expanding into TikTok, which is very exciting. I don't know what's happening. It's brand new.
I love it.
I'm a grandfather. I'm like, what's happening right now?
I know. I love it. And I follow you. I do follow you, and I like your Instagram, and you have the great shorts and stuff like that. So anybody listening, definitely follow you on all those handles and stuff, and reach out if they want to work with you, Rick. So thank you so much for joining today.
This was delightful.
Absolutely.
Man. Thank you for your deep thoughts. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for the good work that you're doing in the world, man. It means a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's beautiful.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks.